Sit back, relax, and please welcome to our stage Eugene O'Neill and Carlotta.
You asked me why I quit the movement. I had a lot of good reasons. One was myself, and another was my comrades, and the last was the breed of swine called men in general. For myself, I was forced to admit, at the end of 30 years' devotion to the cause, that I was never made for it. I was born condemned to be one of those who has to see all sides of a question. When you're damned like that, the questions multiply for you until, in the end, it's all question and no answer. Now, to be a worldly success at anything, as history proves, you have to wear blinders like a horse and see only straight in front of you. You have to see, too, that this is all black and that is all white. As for my comrades in the great cause, I felt as Horace Walpole did about England, that he could love it if it weren't for the people in it. The material the ideal society must be constructed from is men themselves, and you can't build a marble temple out of a mixture of mud and manure. When a man's soul isn't a sow's ear, it will be time enough to dream of silk purses. Some of you may have read an article in the Times about a new play of mine called The Iceman Cometh. I don't know how the report leaked out, but I want to tell you that it is true, more or less, and what you just heard were the words of one of the characters from that play, a man named Larry Slade. Now, I have a confident hunch that this play, as drama, is among the best things I have ever done. In some ways, perhaps the best, although I may still have a surprise or two yet up my sleeve even as early as tonight. But what I mean about The Iceman is, there are moments in it that strip the secret soul of a man stark naked. Now, not in cruelty or moral superiority, but with an understanding and compassion. Those moments are, for me, the depth of tragedy, with nothing more that can possibly be said. But I'd better not start a dissertation on my ideas of what modern tragedy should express, or this will turn into a grandstanding lecture. If you're wondering why you haven't heard more about this play, it's because there are only 2 typed copies of the script in existence. First of these I sent to my editor, Bennett Cerf, at Random House, to lock in the safe. Not for publication, just for safekeeping. And I have the other. As far as I know, only 3 people have read it. Frankly, I didn't want anyone to see it yet, especially my friends in New York. I was afraid my colleagues at the Theater Guild would want to produce it right away, and I don't want the strain of any production now. There are good reasons against it, too. Besides the fact that I want to keep on now doing the only thing that interests me in the theater, writing, and that a production always throws me off work. There is also a physical reason to dread the New York casting rehearsal game. Now, although my health is good, I am not the same as I was before my long illness. Even here in the most peaceful, healthy environment, I still have setbacks of exhaustion in which I have to spend several days in bed. And every time I think of making that long trip back east to face casting, rehearsals, and all the rest of the game, I just feel a great bored weariness and reluctance, as though I had had quite enough of that for one life. Thank you. No, as long as I shun production and stay out here in California, far from the New York scene shop, just doing my job of writing plays, I rate myself the most fortunate man alive. was my wife, Carlotta, who found this remote site in the hills outside Danville and designed Dow House from the ground up.
I told the contractor I wanted something primitive on the outside, but with a Chinese interior. The walls are all double thicknesses of basalite, and you'll notice the masonry blocks are painted white, both inside and out, to give it the look of an old adobe Spanish ranch house. But it's topped off with glazed black tiles, and all the doors are painted a lacquer orange and red to lend it an oriental feel. This ceiling is a rich dark blue, which I've always loved. Oh, and much of the furnishings came from Gump's in San Francisco, a well-known outlet for Far East exotica. A high wall encloses the garden in front, and Eugene planted an almond orchard to flank Dow House with acres of walnut trees lying to the south. It's named for the Chinese word for the right way of life. Oh, another specification I gave the architect was that we had to have room for 8,000 books and 300 pairs of shoes. I'll let you figure out who belongs to which.
I'm satisfied this little ranchero is final home and harbor for me. In my study upstairs, I write at a window that overlooks the whole panorama of the San Ramon Valley with its corduroy hills and long golden brown grasses spreading up the slopes of Mount Diablo. It's one of the most beautiful views I've ever seen, and a perfect location for us. I mean, it's pure country with no taint of suburbia, and yet only 50 minutes drive from the heart of the city by the bay. And with the added privacy it offers, perched up here high in the hills, you would think it would be a perfect situation for a writer. But timing is everything. To tell you the truth, this damned World War debacle has just got me sunk. I mean, ever since the Nazi blitzkrieg started, I have found myself falling deeper and deeper into a profound pessimistic lethargy until finally I couldn't think about work or anything. The 9-play cycle that I'd been working on for the last 4.5 years was on the shelf. God knows if I could ever pick that up again. I mean, with so much tragic drama happening in the world, it's a little hard to take the theater seriously. No, the war news had me so infuriated and disintegrated with emotional conflicts tearing me apart that I could not think about anything else. I mean, Jesus, the suicidal capacity of men for stupid greed. That's about the only thing I can come up with to say, given all that's been done in the name of peace from 1918 to date. No, the invasion of France hit Carlotta and I harder than I would ever have dreamed it could. I mean, make no mistake about it now. I am American by birth and Irish by blood. But next to the United States, France is the place I know and love best, a second country kind of loyalty, if you will. And when Paris and Tours were lost, well, we felt almost as badly as if our house here in California had fallen. An emotional crisis inspired by our memories of our wedding in Paris in 1929 and of the 2 years we spent living in Les Plessis. Well, perhaps Les Plessis will be blown to pieces. This damned war is hitting us where we belong, so to speak.
And yet, what can one do as a person beyond subscribing to the Red Cross and relief funds? What can one do as an author who wants to remain an artist? Oh, forget history, forget philosophy, forget the last World War and what it did to this country.
Forget that it was stupid, double-crossing greed and the weakness of democratic politicians like those swinish British Tories that conspired with Hitler to create Nazi Germany. Forget all this and everything else a free intelligence should remember. And then what? Feel it is one's duty to devote your writing to a hymn of hate or propaganda. Well, I hate Nazism as bitterly as anyone. But I could never do that to my work. I envy authors who can voice a sincere belief in salvation through sociological idealism or through holy wars, but such faiths are not for me, or any other faith, men being what they are. But after a lapse of several months with one ear glued to the radio for war news, I had to get to work on something again. I mean, you can only keep a hophead off his dope for so long. And writing has always been my vacation from life, at least the present life. Well, the result is that in the last year and a half, I have written 2 plays that I am really enthusiastic about. The second of them I finished so recently, it hasn't even been typed yet. I mean, only Carlotta has read it. And to be honest with you, I have a strong feeling against anyone seeing it just now, although you might get to hear some of that tonight. But these are emphatically not plays I want produced or published at this crisis-preoccupied time. I mean, they couldn't be understood, not their real meaning or truth. Well, Iceman Cometh might be a big success if done well, but it would be for its least significant merits. Its finest values would be lost because of the present war psychology. These 2 plays have been on my mind for a long time. Although, as I said, for the last several years, most of my creative energy had been devoted to writing the cycle. Now, the plan had been for those 9 plays to record the history of 2 families, one a traditional Yankee household and the other an Irish immigrant family struggling in New England with all the greed and exploitation, which seems such a common result of our American culture. I had finished drafts of the first 4 plays and had some dialogue on the next one, but I had begun to feel I'd gone stale, and then the war broke out, and so with the world exploding into ruins, I thought I ought to work on some plays I knew I could finish. Well, I looked at notes for various ideas for single plays and came across 2 and decided to write outlines for both of them. So according to my work diary, I started the Iceman outline on June 9th, 1939, and finished it on June 24th. I then began an outline for the other idea, simply called the New London Family Play at that time, on the very next day. I finished that outline on July 3rd, but put it aside to go back and begin work on the first script, making set sketches and character notes. Started writing dialogue on the first idea on July 13th, and by December 14th, had finished a 3rd draft of the complete 4-act script, Long But Grand. On December 20th, I made some minor cuts and corrections and wrote in my work diary, "We'll now call The Iceman Cometh finished." And that is when Carlotta began typing it. Now, if you've read any of my various reminiscences in the press, you'll recognize in this play a lot of material I've talked about over the years. Writing it gave me a chance to pay tribute to all those guys from my own down and out period in New York. Of course, by the time I started writing it, most of those guys were dead, but in the play, their ghosts talked to me, and I to them. Now, Iceman takes place in the back room of Harry Hope's saloon, where down on their luck drunks and derelicts can grab a free lunch or rent a room upstairs for the night. A dirty black curtain separates the back room from the bar. It is an early morning in summer 1912. The back room is crammed with round tables and chairs placed so close together that it is difficult to squeeze past them. 10 men are slumped at these tables. Of them, only Larry Slade is awake. As the curtain rises, Rocky, the night bartender, comes from the bar through the curtain. He signals to Larry and motions him to see if Harry Hope is asleep. Larry rises from his chair to look at Hope and nods to Rocky. Rocky goes back in the bar, but immediately returns with a bottle of our whiskey and a glass. He tells Slade,
Make it fast. Don't want the boss to get wise when he's got one of his tightwad buns on.
I'll be glad to pay up tomorrow. And I know my fellow inmates will promise the same. They've all a touching credulity concerning tomorrows. Oh, it'll be a great day for them tomorrow. The Feast of All Fools with brass bands playing. Their ships will come in loaded to the gunwales with canceled regrets and promises fulfilled and clean slates and new leases.
Yeah, and a ton of hop.
Don't mock the faith. Have you no respect for religion, you unregenerate wop? What's it matter if the truth is that their favoring breeze has the stink of nickel whiskey on its breath, and their sea is a growler of lager and ale, and their ships are long since looted and scuttled and sunk on the bottom? To hell with the truth. As the history of the world proves, the truth has no bearing on anything. It's irrelevant and immaterial, as the lawyers say. The lie of a pipe dream is what gives life to the whole misbegotten mad lot of us, drunk or sober, and that is enough philosophic wisdom to give you for one glass of rot gut.
Yeah, the old fool-losopher like Hickey calls you, ain't ya? I suppose you don't fall for no pipe dream.
I don't, no. Mine are all dead and buried behind me. What's before me is the comforting fact that death is a good long sleep, and I am damn tired, and it can't come too soon for me.
Yeah, just hanging around hoping you'll croak, ain't ya? Well, I'm betting you'll have a good long wait before somebody takes an axe to croak you.
Yes, it's my bad luck to be cursed with an iron constitution that even Harry's booze can't corrode. Harry Hope's bar, where the booze is said to be cyanide cut with carbolic acid to give it a mellow flavor, is not based on one place, but actually 3 dives that I hung out in between 1911 and 1915. 2 dives and the tap room of a Midtown hotel, to be truthful. First of these was a no-name saloon known only as Jimmy the Priest's. When you looked in the window, all you saw was a sketch of a beer glass, and under that, in faded yellow lettering, the words, "Schooner, 5 cents." Its chief attraction was cheap drinks, but it also had the advantage of staying open later than most bars in the neighborhood, and nobody gave you a hard time if you fell asleep with your head on a table. Or, for $3 a month, you could rent one of the cells in the flop house over the saloon. I know, I did. But in July, those cells were like ovens. Oh, thick with the smell of cigar smoke and stale beer and unwashed bodies. It was awful. One couldn't go any lower. Oh, Gorky's Night's Lodging in lower depths was an ice cream parlor by comparison. The house was practically falling down, and the chief house wreckers were vermin. But at noon every day, the owner put out a large free lunch spread, which featured an enormous pot of soup. And it wasn't too bad either until it was flecked with flies and other insects. Now, most of the crowd were stand-up drinkers who were in and out of the bar quickly and after they'd had their drinks. But the lodgers and the other hangers-on, they depended on that lunch. Oh, they were a hard lot at first glance. Every type. Sailors on shore leave or stranded without ships, longshoremen, gangsters, waterfront riffraff, drifters from the ends of the earth. But they were sincere, loyal, and generous. In some queer way, they managed to carry on. I learned at Jimmy the Priest's not to sit in judgment of people. Well, from Rocky, we learn that a young man named Don Parrott, who came to Harry Hope's looking for Slade, is upstairs resting. Rocky questions Larry about this strange young man and claims to have seen a roll of bills in the young man's pocket when he paid for his room.
Yeah, he flashed it like he'd forgotten. then tried to hide it real quick.
He did he?
Yeah, I figured he don't belong, but he said he was a friend of yours.
Oh, he's a liar. I wouldn't know him if he hadn't told me who he was. His mother and I were friends years ago on the coast. Now, you read in the papers about that bombing on the coast when several people got killed. Well, the one woman they pinched, Rosa Parrott, is his mother. They'll be coming up for trial soon, and there's no chance for them. She'll get life, I think. I'm telling you this so you'll know why if Don acts a bit queer and not jump on him. He must be hard hit. He's her only kid.
Yeah, well, why ain't he out there sticking by her?
Don't ask questions. Maybe there's a good reason. Short time later, Don Parrott appears in the doorway. Slade greets him by saying, "Sit down and join the bums then." Rules of the house are that drinks can be served at all hours. With this obvious invitation, the young man buys him a drink.
I've been in some dumps on the coast, but this is the limit. What kind of joint is it anyway?
What is it? It's the No Chance Saloon. It's Bedrock Bar, the end of the line cafe, the bottom of the sea Rathskeller. Don't you notice the beautiful calm in the atmosphere? That's because it's the last harbor. No one is worrying about where they're going next because there is no farther they can go. It's a great comfort to them. Although even here they keep up the appearances of life with a few harmless pipe dreams about their yesterdays and tomorrows, as you'll see for yourself if you're here long enough.
What's your pipe dream, Larry?
Oh, I'm the exception. I haven't any left, thank God. Hey, don't complain about this place. You couldn't find a better for lying low.
Oh, I'm glad of that, Larry. I don't feel any too damn good. I was knocked off my base by that business on the coast, and since then it's been no fun dodging around the country thinking every guy you see might be a cop.
No, it wouldn't be. But you're safe here. The cops ignore this dump. They think it's as harmless as a graveyard. And by God, they're right. Well, once assured that he's safe, Parrott explains what a lonely hell it's been for him since he was been on the run and his comrades were arrested.
Oh, Christ, Larry. I was glad to find you. I kept saying to myself, if only I could find Larry. He's the one guy who can understand.
Understand what?
Why, all I've been through. Oh, I know what you're thinking. This guy has a hell of a nerve. I haven't seen him since he was a kid. I'd forgotten he was alive. But I've never forgotten you, Larry. You were the one friend of Mother's who ever paid any attention to me or even knew I was alive. All the others were too busy with the movement. Even Mother.
I remember well. You were a serious, lonely little shaver. How is it they didn't pick you up when they got your mother and the rest?
I wasn't around, and as soon as I heard the news, I went undercover. You've noticed my glad rags. I was staked to them as a disguise, sort of. I hung around in pool rooms and gambling joints and hooker shops, pretending I was a sport. Anyway, they'd grabbed everyone important, so I suppose they didn't think of me till afterward.
Papers say the cops got them all dead to rights, that the Burns Dicks knew every move before it was made, and someone inside the movement must have sold out and tipped them off.
Yes, I guess that must be true, Larry. It hasn't come out who it was. May never come out. I suppose whoever it was made a bargain with the Burns men to keep him out of it.
The story of Don Parrott has an interesting background in fact. Now, many of us knew in those days the main details of the McNamara case, which involved the bombing of the Los Angeles Times by anarchists and resulted in the death of 25 people. But it was an old drinking companion of mine, Terry Carlin, who gave me the inside dope on how the last culprit in that case was caught. See, Donald Bose, who was the nephew of Emma Goldman and the son of a leading anarchist woman, admitted during the trial that he had been employed by a detective to inform on Matthew Schmidt, the third and final suspect in the bombing. Now, they gave Bose a new set of clothing and a pocket full of cash to spend on his friends and sent him off to New York to track down Schmidt. After the trial, Mose became a Judas to the movement and was the prototype for Don Parrott. Although in the play, it's his own mother he's turned in, a crime he cannot confess to until almost the end of the play. Now, if you were to look at my notes for The Iceman Cometh, you would find a chart listing the names of real people all these characters are based on. But I'd have to be Bughouse before I'd let you do that. No, I want the play to stand on its own merits. I will give you the inside scoop on a couple of characters, however. Terry Carlin was the model for Larry Slade. He was an insolvent socialist philosopher when we first met at the hellhole, the other dive I practically lived in, and we remained close friends for 2 decades. Carlin died 10 years ago, unknown to fame, but one of the grandest guys I have ever known. Now, the hellhole was really called the Golden Swan, but most of its habitués in Greenwich Village knew it by its more colorful underworld name. Its owner was a proud old Irishman named Tom Wallace, the counterpart for Harry Hope in the play. Now, in Iceman, Harry Hope has refused to go outside of his bar since the death of his wife 20 years ago. But he entertains the pipe dream that he will take that walk tomorrow. Unlike Hope, Tom Wallace would not even come downstairs, but remained confined to the upstairs rooms he maintained over the saloon. Oh, he was an unseen presence, aging, his vision failing, whose cane could be heard rapping day and night on that upper floor, summoning the bartenders whenever he wanted more beer and whiskey for himself and the cronies that always surrounded him. The hellhole also had a beat-up, old-fashioned player piano. It was, in the words of my friend Max Bodenheim, an instrument of brazen agonies that played tunes of the day when you dropped a nickel into it. Oh, I suppose it was a bit tinny, but I loved that old piano. And although you don't see it in Iceman Cometh, I kind of think you can hear it playing under all the hubbub of the noisy bar room.
Because of his affection for that player piano, I gave Gene as a 45th birthday present a garishly painted player piano for our home, which he named Rosie. Oh, it was a great moment in his life when she burst on his sight in that remote storeroom of Wurlitzer's in all her gangrenous green festooned with rosebud's beauty. Oh, and we can only think that there must have been an artist soul lost to the world somewhere in that New Orleans honky-tonk.
Or bordello.
That Rosie originally came from.
But to get back to The Iceman Cometh, there is one more character that we have to introduce. An important character, although he doesn't appear until the end of Act 1. And that is Theodore Hickman, or Hickey as they call him, a hardware salesman who comes in twice a year to get drunk and to help celebrate Harry Hope's birthday. Now, Hickey is the most imaginary character in the play. I never knew him. Of course, in my time, I knew plenty of traveling salesmen who were periodical drunks, but Hickey is not any one of them. He is all of them, you might say. As each of the men in Harry Hope's back room wake up from their drunken sleep, they slowly muster the courage to face the day ahead, fortified by their pipe dreams and the thought of Hickey's impending visit. And when he finally does arrive, he does a little burlesque routine, throwing back his head and singing, "It's always fair weather when good fellas get together." And the crowd roars with laughter, and Hickey calls in a lordly manner, "Do your duty, Brother Rocky. Bring on the rat poison." But when they raise their glasses and join him with the usual humorous toasts, Hickey surprises them by saying, "You'll have to excuse me, boys and girls, but I am off the stuff for keeps." The first one to challenge him is Hope.
What the hell? Oh, sure, joined the Salvation Army, ain't ya? Oh, take that bottle away from him, Rocky. We don't want to tempt him into sin.
No, honest, Harry, I know it's hard to believe, but I have changed. I mean, about booze. I don't need it anymore.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, kid the pants off us. But geez, Cora said you was coming to save us. Well, go ahead, get this joke off your chest, start the service, sing a goddamn hymn if you like. We'll all join in the chorus.
Oh, hell, Governor, you don't think I'd come around here peddling some brand of temperance bunk, do you? You know me better than that. Just because I'm through with the stuff don't mean I'm going prohibition. Hell, I'm not that ungrateful. It's given me too many good times. I feel exactly the same as I always did. If anyone wants to get drunk, if that's the only way they can be happy and feel at peace with themselves, why the hell shouldn't they? They have my full and entire sympathy.
Oh, that water wagon bull. Cut out the act and have a drink, for Christ's sake.
No, it's no act, Governor. But don't get me wrong, that don't mean I'm a teetotal grouch. Hell, why do you suppose I'm here except to have a party, same as I've always done, and to help celebrate your birthday tonight? You've all been good pals to me. The best friends I've ever had. I've been thinking about you ever since I left the house. All the time I was walking over here.
Walking? But geez, do you mean to say you walked?
I sure did. All the way from the wilds of darkest Astoria. Didn't mind it a bit either. I seemed to get here before I knew it. I'm a bit tired and sleepy, but otherwise I feel great. That ought to encourage you, Governor. Show you a little walk around the ward is nothing to be so scared about. Well, I didn't make such bad time either, considering it's a hell of a ways, and I sat in the park a while thinking. It was going on 12 when I went in the bedroom to tell Evelyn I was leaving. 6 hours, say? No, less than that. I'd been standing on the corner some time before Cora and Chuck came along, thinking about all of you. Of course, I was only kidding Cora with that stuff about saving you. No, I wasn't either. But I didn't mean booze. I meant save you from pipe dreams. I know now, from my experience, they're the things that really poison and ruin a guy's life. If you knew how free and contented I feel now. I'm like a new man. And the cure is so damn simple once you have the nerve. Just the old dope of honesty is the best policy. Honesty with yourself, I mean. Just stop lying about yourself and kidding yourself about tomorrows. What Hickey fails to tell them is that his newfound honesty has driven him to commit a terrible crime. One that I won't reveal for those of you who haven't read the play. I'm immensely gratified by the way this play came out. I cannot be becomingly modest. I unhesitatingly give myself a pat on the back for it. What I tried to do was to write a play with a wholeness of character, the life story of each character, so that at the end of the play you feel you know the souls of all 17 men and women who appear in it. Now, this presents some problems for casting because it means you need 17 fine actors, and if I were concerned with production, I know it would be wise to condense things. But I couldn't condense much without taking a lot of life from these characters. And I seriously believe that would change the essential quality of the play. Without the atmosphere of the place or the humor and friendship, you would not be so interested in these characters. You wouldn't feel the same sympathy or understanding or be so moved by what Hickey does to them. One by one, Hickey confronts each of the down and outers in Harry Hope's bar, convincing them to give up their pipe dreams and face reality, even if it kills them. The thing that ultimately saves the characters in Iceman Cometh is their friendship, but it's the pipe dreams of these derelicts that has made life tolerable for them. It's their pipe dreams that give them hope. But a New York audience could neither hear nor see that in this time of war. The defensive need for a pipe dream or an illusion to sustain you in life would be seen as a weakness and downright unpatriotic. However, I think America will understand a lot of The Iceman Cometh only too well once this war is over. So you won't see a new play of mine next year or the year after that. I'm glad to have a long creative vacation from the Broadway amusement racket. And America's already had a belly full of my stuff, enough to last it a long while. The glamour of the show shop and the fascination of casting and rehearsing and performing were never glamorous or fascinating to me. No, to put it mildly, they lost their appeal at a very early age, when I had to tour for the first 7 years of my life with my father's production of The Count of Monte Cristo. It's one of the reasons I can't stand hotels to this day. Speaking of father, in February of 1940, I started work on the other non-cycle play. And although both plays are set in the same year, 1912, this one took me back even further into my past. In writing it, I felt like I had locked myself in a room with my worst childhood memories. Now, by then, I had a better title for it. I was calling it Long Day's Journey into Night. It is the story of one day, 8 a.m. to midnight, in the life of a family of 4, father, mother, and 2 sons, living in New London, Connecticut. Now, in the play, the father is a successful actor. His wife, Mary, is supposedly a reformed morphine addict. Of 2 sons, the older one, Jamie, is trying to drown in alcohol a life filled with regrets, while the younger son, Edmund, has recently been diagnosed with tuberculosis. Now, some of this sounds like autobiography. I can't kick about it. My own time in a sanatorium with tuberculosis was the subject of one of my early plays, and is certainly no secret. However, I will say that the press has harped on it long after it was of any consequence. I wouldn't be surprised to read today that I am living in California because I am slowly dying of TB. Now, what I've got is hereditary. Even bad whiskey won't cure it. And many people know that my father starred in one of the most successful plays of all time in America. For 30 years, toured all over the country to big cities and small towns at a time when every place on the map had its own theater. But he also felt a great resentment towards the play and confessed to me that Monte Cristo had been his curse. Oh, it was a great romantic part. I knew I could play better than anyone else, he would later confess to me. But it ruined me with its promise of an easy fortune. From the beginning, it was a big money success. So successful, in fact, that he was even able to hire a couple of novices like my brother Jamie and I to act as thespians with him on occasion. Now, Jamie showed promise as a performer and managed to ride the old man's coattails for some years. But he had little regard for the profession and continually threatened to give it back to the performing seals, which in his words were its most perfect expression, because they admit that they're just hams earning their daily fish, and they never hesitate to give themselves a round of applause. And as for my acting, the least said about that, the better. No. With Jamie and I on stage, the alcohol content was as high as the acting was low. And my one remorseful thought is that I was not able to warn audiences in advance of my performance so they could all get drunk too. It must have been a terrible thing to witness sober. Now, Carlotta complains when I repeat what she calls those silly, hoodlumish legends from the Monte Cristo days, but that's because she was an actress when we met and has a respect for the profession which I, unfortunately, have never shared. No, to be honest with you, there have only been 3 actors who've managed to create my roles as I saw them. Charles Gilpin as Emperor Jones, Louis Walheim in The Hairy Ape, and Walter Euston in Desire Under the Elms.
What about that charming woman who appeared in the Broadway company of The Hairy Ape?
You mean the famous beauty, Carlotta Monterey? Well, I suppose she looked the part more than a previous actress had, and she was certainly memorable in her way. But I was largely unimpressed with her acting at the time. Besides, I heard she had the ill fortune of marrying a playwright.
Poor dear. Why would anyone in her right mind give up the excitement of the stage in order to become a full-time nursemaid, housekeeper, mistress, and typist?
Well, I think your question speaks to her good sense. But if you miss the excitement of the stage, perhaps you'd like to read this speech for our guests, in which the mother from Long Day's Journey describes her first meeting to the family servant with her future husband. Unlike Iceman, it really needs a woman's touch.
It would be my pleasure. If you think Mr. Tyrone is handsome now, Kathleen, you should have seen him when I first met him. We had the reputation of being one of the best-looking men in the country. The girls in the convent who had seen him act or seen his photographs used to rave about him. He was a great matinee idol then, you know. Women used to wait at the stage door just to see him come out. Oh, you can imagine how excited I was when my father wrote me that he and James Tyrone had become friends, and that I was to meet him when I came home for Easter vacation. I showed the letter to all the girls, and oh, how envious they were. My father took me to see him act first. It was a play about the French Revolution, and the leading part was a nobleman. Oh, I couldn't take my eyes off him. I wept when he was thrown in prison, and then was so mad at myself because my eyes and nose would be all red. My father had said we'd go backstage to his dressing room right after the play, and so we did. Oh, I was so bashful. All I could do was stammer and blush like a little fool. But he didn't seem to think I was a fool. I know he liked me the first moment we were introduced. I guess my eyes and nose couldn't have been red after all. I was really very pretty then, Kathleen. Oh, and he was handsomer than my wildest dream in his makeup and his nobleman's costume that was so becoming to him. He was different from all ordinary men, like someone from another world, when at the same time he was simple and kind and unassuming. Oh, not a bit stuck up or vain. I fell in love right then. So did he told me afterwards. Oh, I forgot all about becoming a nun or a concert pianist. All I wanted was to be his wife, 36 years ago. But I can still see it as clearly as if it were tonight. We've loved each other ever since. And in all those 36 years, there has never been a breath of scandal about him. I mean, with any other woman. Never since he met me. That has made me very happy, Kathleen. It has made me forgive so many other things. Kathleen says,
Oh, he's a fine gentleman, ma'am, and you are a lucky woman. Can I take that drink to Bridget, ma'am? It must be near dinner time, and I ought to be in the kitchen helping her before she takes the hatchet to me.
yes. Yes, go. I don't need you now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, you're a sentimental fool. What is so wonderful about that first meeting between a silly romantic schoolgirl and a matinee idol? You were much happier before you knew he existed in the convent, when you used to pray to the Blessed Virgin. If only I could find the faith I lost so I could pray again. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. I expect the Blessed Virgin to be fooled by a lying dope fiend recited words. You can't hide from her. I must go upstairs. I haven't taken enough. When you start again, you never know exactly how much you need.
That story is no exaggeration either. When my mother, fresh out of convent school, first met James O'Neill, he was a matinee idol. But, like the character of James Tyrone in the play, he felt a great bitterness because he thought that the play had lured him with popularity and easy money. Before he knew it, he'd become a slave to the damn thing, and when he did try to do other plays, it was too late. He had lost the great talent he once had through easy repetition. As for my mother's alcoholism and or drug addiction and Jamie's alcoholism, you haven't heard about these because these were things we didn't talk about. They were not fodder for the press boys who can make a dinosaur out of a bacillus. No, these were private matters. But I think in writing about them now, I have been truthful.
Yes, I think you have. Well, it's quite a contrast to our first meeting.
Well, that's true. Anyone witnessing that little tete-a-tete would have given us long odds on being together today, huh?
Oh, well, don't blame me. It was all Arthur Hopkins' fault. You see, Hoppy had agreed to sponsor the Provincetown production of The Hairy Ape on Broadway, but at his insistence, the female lead was to be replaced. I was his first choice, but I was reluctant to be in The Hairy Ape. I'd already done 2 things that season, and I was tired. Besides, I wanted to go out to California and see my mother and child.
Well, another reason you didn't want to do it was because you felt the company would certainly hate you, since you were replacing one of their original members.
Well, that's true, but Hoppy had been good to me, and it was hard to refuse him. So I did it. Well, my first meeting with Mr. O'Neill was disastrous. He had slipped into the back of the Plymouth Theater one day when I was having trouble with one of his scenes.
She was blowing the lines left and right, and as the rehearsal ended, proceeded to shout disparaging remarks to all and sunder about the play and its witless author.
I then joined Hoppy and the stranger seated next to him out in the auditorium. And Hoppy says to me, "Carlotta, I want you to meet Mr. O'Neill." And I said, very politely, "How do you do?" To which he said, "Hello," or something like that, but nothing more, and paid no more attention to me than if I were this chair. No thank you for going into his play with hardly any rehearsal. Not even a go to hell. However, I was also very surprised. From all I'd heard, I'd expected someone in old pants and a sweater and needing a shave. But he was neat, in a dark suit and a white shirt with not a hair out of place. So I whispered to Hoppy, "Is this really Eugene O'Neill?"
But you still didn't like me.
"No. I thought you were the rudest man I'd ever met. Very ill-mannered."
Is there any way I can make it up to you now, Shadow Eyes?
"Do you suppose I could have a glass of water?"
For you, darling, anything. Bring you a fresh glass.
One of the advantages of being the typist is getting to read things in advance of the general public. In this case, far in advance, since Gene has been very explicit that Long Day's Journey should not be published until 25 years after his death. For Carlotta, on our 12th wedding anniversary. Dearest, I give you the original script of this play of old sorrow, written in tears and blood. A sadly inappropriate gift, it would seem, for a day celebrating happiness. But you will understand. These 12 years, beloved one, have been a journey into light, into love. You know my gratitude, Jean. I've tried to type this play twice, and I've wept most of the time. It upset me so. But what I was feeling was nothing compared to Jean. I think it nearly killed him to write this play. His workday was long, 5 hours in the morning and extra hours in the afternoon, and he was a man being tortured every day by his own writing. He would come out of the study at the end of the day, physically and mentally exhausted. His eyes would be all red, and he looked 10 years older than when he went in the morning. Night after night, he would come in and talk to me, and I had to hold him tight in my arms just so he could relax, sleep. But he was thinking about this play, you see. He explained to me then that he had to write this play. He had to write it because it was a thing that haunted him. It was an ache in the heart for things that we can't escape. And he had to forgive whatever had caused this in them, his mother and father and brother, and in himself. Well, it wasn't so different from when I first got to know him in New York. He would come up to my apartment on East 67th Street, and he would talk and talk as if he'd known me his whole life. Hardly knew the man. But he began to talk about his early life, that he had had no real home, had no mother in the real sense, no father in the real sense, no one to treat him as a child should be treated. For 3 afternoons, I sat and listened. At first, I was a little bit worried, and then I became deeply unhappy. I thought of all people to be so stricken, a man who has worked hard, who has talent and all, and his face would become sadder, and he would talk, and finally he would say, "Do you know what time it is?" And I would say, "There is a clock, there." And he'd say, I have to go, and he would rush out to a rehearsal, only to come back the next day and go on. We never said, "I love you. I think you're wonderful. I think you're grand." He just kept saying, "I need you. I need you. I need you." And at times it was a bit frightening. But he did need me, I've discovered. Well, he was never in very good health. Always had a cold, wasn't properly fed or anything. Well, that's what got me into all my troubles with O'Neill. My maternal instinct came out.
I may have gone overboard with that part about having no real home, no mother, no father.
Yes. How so?
Well, it's been well documented that when I was younger and father wasn't on tour, we usually spent our summers in New London, Connecticut. We had a quaint little bird cage of a house, which we had nicknamed the Monte Cristo Cottage, because father had paid for it with the money he'd made in that goddamn play I bought for a song and made such a great success in, a great money success, as he called it. But that was the closest thing to a real home I ever knew. I liked New London as a child. I loved to sit out on the rocks and draw pictures of the boats as they sailed by. I loved hearing my mother's piano playing from the house in the distance. I loved listening to my father reciting whole passages of Shakespeare, entirely from memory. But most of all, I loved the sure presence of my family being there. Papa, my brother Jamie, our nurse Sarah, and more than anyone else, Mama. She was the most beautiful woman in the world to me. I was very proud of Mama. Then, that was before the summer depicted in Long Day's Journey, when Mother had fallen back on her old habits and was again addicted to her medicine. And we would listen to her moving above and beyond us, a ghost haunting the past. No doubt some people are asking if they haven't already seen my life on stage under the marquee title, Ah, Wilderness. But let me just say that despite the similarities in setting, both of them are in New London, and despite what everyone has read in the press, Ah, Wilderness is not autobiographical. No, apart from a few wisps of reminiscence, you're not going to learn anything about my childhood in that play. It was a sort of wishing out loud. It's the way I would have liked my boyhood to have been. No, but this play comes closer than anything else I have written to summing up my early life. And when the character of Edmund says to his father, "You've just told me some high spots in your memories. You want to hear mine? They're all connected with the sea." I can almost see myself as a young man sitting in the docks in Boston watching the clipper ships and square riggers going out to sea. I looked out at the bay and I asked, what was beyond that horizon? And I knew then that I too must go to sea. Shortly after that, I sailed on the Charles Racine out of Boston Harbor, bound for Buenos Aires. It was Joseph Conrad who said that the true peace of God begins at any spot 1,000 miles from the nearest land. And I say amen to that. But let me read you a little bit of Long Day's Journey, where the character of Edmund tries to explain this same feeling to his father. Full moon in the trades, the old hooker driving 14 knots. I lay on the bowsprit, facing astern, with the water foaming into spume under me, the masts with every sail, white in the moonlight, towering high above me. I became drunk with the beauty and singing rhythm of it, and for a moment I lost myself, actually lost my life. I was set free. I dissolved in the sea, became white sails and flying spray, became beauty and rhythm, became moonlight in the ship and the high dim-starred sky. I belonged, without past or future, within peace and unity and a wild joy, within something greater than my own life or the life of man, to life itself, to God, if you want to put it that way. And several other times in my life when I was swimming far out or lying alone on a beach, I've had the same experience. Became the sun, the hot sand, green seaweed anchored to a rock, swaying in the tide, like a saint's vision of beatitude, like the veil of things as they seem drawn back by an unseen hand. For a second you see, and seeing the secret are the secret. For a second, there is meaning. Then the hand lets the veil fall, and you are alone, lost in the fog again, and you stumble on toward nowhere for no good reason. It was a great mistake my being born a man. I would have been much more successful as a seagull or a fish. As it is, I will always be a stranger who never feels at home, who does not really want and is not really wanted, who can never belong, who must always be a little in love with death.
Ah, yes. There's the makings of a poet in you, all right.
The makings of a poet. No, I'm afraid I'm like the guy who is always panhandling for a smoke. He hasn't even got the makings. He's got only the habit. I couldn't touch what I tried to tell you just now. I just stammered. It's the best I'll ever do. I mean, if I live. Well, it will be faithful realism at least. Stammering is the native eloquence of us fog people. I like this play better than any I have ever written. It's a deeply tragic play, but without any violent, dramatic action. I guess in that respect, it's a departure for me. Even my first published volume of one-act plays was criticized in the only review it received for the grim and ghastly situations that ran throughout each piece, with the reviewer finally concluding, "This writer's favorite mood is horror." Well, I guess when you take into account the suicide and murder angles in The Iceman Cometh, I really haven't changed that much. But this play is different. It's a quiet play. Does the most with the least. At the final curtain, there they still are, the 4 tortured members of the Tyrone family, each trapped within the past, each guilty and yet also innocent, scorning, loving, pitying each other, understanding one another and yet not understanding at all, forgiving but still doomed, never to be able to forget. Shortly after Anna Christie came out, a reporter from the hometown newspaper, the New London Telegraph, asked me, "Are you our foremost apostle of woe? Why don't you write a play with a happy ending?" I didn't have the heart to tell him that most people criticized Anna Christie because they thought it did have a happy ending. No, my answer was, I write tragedy, and it is a modern-day misjudgment to think that tragedy is unhappy. I mean, look at the Greeks and Shakespeare. Besides, I went on, I'll write about happiness if I ever happen to meet up with that luxury and find it sufficiently dramatic and in harmony with any deep rhythm of life. Happiness is only a word. And any fool knows that to work hard at something you want to accomplish is the only way to be happy. So the thing is to go on and do your stuff as long as you can, no matter what happens and no matter what anyone thinks. And so I want to keep on writing, finish all that I can while I can. Well, since Carlotta is out of the room and isn't driving me up to my den to continue writing, perhaps we could take a few questions anyone would like to ask us. Anyone have any questions for me? I know you're all waiting for Carlotta to come back so you can ask her questions. Okay, well, I'll see if she's willing to come out and entertain questions from you. Hello, dear. Hello. Anyone have any questions for either one of us?
Up in the balcony.
There's someone up there, yes.
How did you find California, Danville?
Oh, well, actually,
I'm
I
from
have,
California.
yes, and
I was born in Oakland.
my brother Jamie was born in a hotel room in San Francisco.
Oh,
So
yes.
we actually have a history that goes back to the West Coast. But yes, it was really Carlotta's discovery of this place. So I'll let her tell the
Yeah,
story.
well, we had been living in Georgia, and it was a little
Damp
humid
and
there
a lot of
for us.
mosquitoes. There were more
Yes.
bugs there than there were in the hellhole.
And we came out to visit my family in the Oakland area, and actually, Gene got terribly ill while we were
I had an
we were on that
appendicitis that
trip.
put me in the hospital for several months.
And while he was in the hospital, I took advantage of that time to look around the area, and I found that lovely little piece of land that we built our house on.
Other questions? Upper or lower? Here's one down here, yes? I was actually very good friends with her daughter. I was probably a better father to her daughter than I was to my own children. And I'm not sure if it's a case of passing on the bad behavior from one generation to the next. I know that in some ways it's always been a seeking the right relationship. And unfortunately, the children were not part of the right relationship for myself. Their mothers went their separate ways, and the kids got lost in the shuffle. And I felt terrible about it. When Carlotta and I left for France to get married, I wrote a very heartfelt letter to my son Shane, trying to explain why I wasn't going to be there. But different people in relationships have different goals and agendas, and I did not get along well with their mothers. So I don't know what else I can say about that. I actually have 3 children from 2 marriages. What's that? The question was, how many children do I have? And I have 3 children from 2 marriages. One was a young romance, and as soon as my wife declared that, my future wife declared that she was pregnant, my parents put me on a boat to Honduras, and her parents gladly said bon voyage to me, and we actually remained on pretty good speaking terms over the years. Eugene Jr. was the son from that marriage. And then I had a second marriage with a writer named Agnes Bolton, and we had 2 children. And I will admit that I have disowned not only Agnes, but also the children. Una left a very good impression, I think, with Carlotta when she came to visit us, until she decided to marry that goddamn ballerina, Charlie Chaplin. And at that point, a man as old as me, and at that point I said, well, all right, dear, to hell with you. You want to be a New York debutante? Fine. You want to live your own life, and you don't care what I think. So.
And I have 1 child by my second husband, Cynthia Jane. She is 25 right now. We don't see her very often, but she lives in the area.
Yes, and actually, she's a wonderful gal. I really like her. Yes, question up here?
What was school like for you when you were little and growing up?
Well, I went to a private school when I was a small child, and I spent a year drinking at Princeton, and managed to throw a rock through the president's window. And at that point, they decided that I had learned as much as I was going to learn at Princeton. But I will tell you, one of the most formative educational experiences that I had was when I was 26. I actually worked hard to become part of George Pierce Baker's playwriting class at Harvard. I only spent a semester there taking that one class, but it left a lasting impression on me. I still use the work skills that I learned in that course when I begin the development of a play, writing an outline and working as George Pierce Baker had taught us to do. And so that, I think at that point, I was ready to be a good student, and by God, I was. Yes, further question? Oh, did you want to? Well, you know, I actually liked The Count of Monte Cristo and other Dumas books until my father was in that damn play, and I had to hear it over and over again. The world is mine! You know, oh, it was so melodramatic, I hated it. But up until that point, I liked adventure stories. When I was a little older and I was in the sanitarium, I actually discovered the first English printing of Strindberg, who left a strong impression on me, a wonderful playwright. I read Ibsen later in life. So my taste changed from the point when I was younger and when I became more committed to being a writer. I began to discover things that I wasn't aware of when I was a child. So, do you have any comments?
Well, no.
All right then, we'll go on to another question. All right, yes, a question over here. Well, we were very fortunate. I say we were fortunate, but at the time I did not feel the least bit fortunate. But Carlotta had an annuity, which she can go into further explanation of, which gave her a good foundation financially. And in 1936, I had the terrible misfortune of winning the Nobel Prize. I tried to talk my editor into saying, no, come on, I don't want it. And he said, no, you got to accept it. The Nobel Prize was a big income, and it was a great, obviously, great notoriety at that point. But I told people I felt like an old cab horse that somebody had pinned a gold ribbon to their tail, and I was too tired to turn around and find out if it tasted good. But it just seemed like a waste of time and too much attention. But that gave us an additional income as well. So it allowed me to not be concerned with production. I didn't, because for so long in the 1920s, I really did have to rely on the whims of producers, whether they would produce the plays on Broadway, and I was anxious to have that income. But from that point on, the money became less and less important. A lesson I should have learned much earlier from my father, but had not. Again, I sort of committed the same sins of the father in that case, because I felt I needed to have some possessions and income, when really I just needed to work on what I wanted to work on and not be concerned with its reception. Do you want to talk about your annuity?
Well, I'd prefer not to reveal any
All right.
of the details. Other than that, it was a very generous annuity by a very wealthy gentleman, and it kept us quite comfortable. We didn't need to worry about money.
Right. And you didn't have to worry about money long after that. So it's very good. All right, other questions? Do I see a hand? Yes, a hand down here.
We visited your house.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't there.
Oh, it was very quiet. That was the beauty of it. You heard insignificant things like nature, but you really were far removed from any kind of civilization. So it was very private. It was almost like a cave. Especially in my den. I was up on the second floor and removed from the rest of the household. And Carlotta was very committed to making sure that we had a limited amount of interruptions.
I chose that space specifically so that we would not be bothered with a lot of visitors. Gene needed his quiet time to be able to work, and I wanted to make sure we could tell if anyone was coming.
Now, it has become more difficult to live there, I will say, due to the war, because, first of all, rationing has reduced gasoline, and a lot of the people who worked for us at Dow House were, unfortunately, needed for the war effort. So we ended up, we don't drive, and suddenly our chauffeur was gone, which left us sort of stranded up there in the hills, and harder to get groceries and things. So it's certainly been a bit of a challenge to continue to stay there, but we're hopeful that we can continue to work there. And I've started working on some other projects while at Dow House. So it has been a wonderful place to get away to just think about what I really want to say. Other questions? Yes, one more question.
Oh, no.
But they visited.
Children would be a terrible distraction to Gene. We wouldn't want that.
Yes, that's true. One last question? Yes, down here in front.
Why was it that you didn't want your plays published? Was it too painful for you?
Well, I just felt that they would not be received the way that I wanted them to because of the timing. The war, the things that I had to say were not things that people wanted to hear at that point. So I felt, and in the case of Long Day's Journey, there are some very personal things in there that I wanted to keep from the few remaining relatives that I had, and felt that the emphasis would be on the wrong thing. People would want to look at how it related to my life, and they might feel sorry for me and stuff like that, and that wasn't my intention. My intention was to write something honestly about my family, and hopefully equally honestly about myself. It was not meant to be an apology or anything else. I hope I took as hard a look at the character of Edmund in the play as I did at the rest of my family. And because we invited you and you're here in our house, I will tell you, but I don't want you to tell other people. The choice of the name Edmund in the play is actually the name of what would have been my middle brother, who died of the measles because my brother Jamie had the measles and gave them to him, which created a great guilt in Jamie. The doctors encouraged my mother to have a third child, and so she had me, and it was a painful childbirth, and the doctors gave her morphine, which became almost a lifelong addiction. So one thing after another. Well, I see someone standing in the wings, so I think wants to come and interrupt our little party.
It is now my pleasure to introduce you to the actors that we have tonight. Our performers, we have Dale and Brian Kroll, who first worked together in the theater more than 30 years ago. Dale as an actress and costume designer, and Brian as a director and playwright. Brian is the author of 20 plays, whose 2002 script, Paper Lanterns, Paper Cranes, was selected as the best published play in the United States. And he will be familiar to Pleasanton audiences who have been coming to the speaker series, which many of you are, for his portrayal of Howard Hughes, as well as Buffalo Bill Cody just last year. So he will Jim this morning didn't recognize him. And then Dale is a recently retired elementary school teacher, and this is her second Chautauqua character, having previously appeared as Annie Oakley opposite Brian's Buffalo Bill. And they have one daughter, Harper, who is currently a sophomore at Colorado College, and they used to live in Nevada and have recently, in the last couple of years, moved to Colorado. So please help me in welcoming Dale and Brian.
And now we can answer questions that the characters might not have been willing to talk to you.
Now we can tell the gory details of like an annuity.
Or whatever else you might be interested in. Yes,
I just would compliment you. I would never realize you were Buffalo.
Oh, thank you, yeah. It's amazing what a haircut and a shave will do. Yeah. Well. Other questions? Oh, sorry, yes? Well, I will say that I felt that I wanted to be a writer as young as a high school student, and one of the first things that really had an impact on me was Long Day's Journey to Night. I think it's a powerful work, and I was really struck by that, and I think it shaped the way I approached writing as well. So it was not a goal at that point, certainly, to try to, reenact O'Neill. But then later on, when I started doing the Chautauquas, O'Neill was not the first person that I gravitated to, but then eventually there was a Chautauqua in northern Nevada where the theme was creativity under conflict. And it just seemed to me that not only O'Neill, but O'Neill in this time period was a perfect expression of that, trying to write through all the things that were going on in the world and personally in his life. He seemed like a natural choice. And so it was an opportunity for me to, in a way, go back, because I'd moved forward and sort of let some of those things go. But it was eye-opening to examine him again and to appreciate it on a larger level who he was and how important he was to the American theater, because he really did change it. In the 1920s, his experimental works were just unheard of. He was writing in reaction to his father's theater, and there really was not a respectable American theater at that point until O'Neill began writing those early plays. And that's why he was, and still is, the only American playwright ever to win the Nobel Prize, because the European audiences recognized in some ways how important he was, even more than the New York audiences did. So anyway, I'm sorry that was a long-winded explanation, but hopefully it answered your question.
Well, and as an actress, I don't think I would choose Carlotta, except that, Brian convinced me that I should do her. I would like to think that as an actress, I'm not quite as dramatic as Carlotta was, being, from the period of the teens and the 20s when, silent films actresses were much more overly dramatic. In fact, her real name was not Carlotta Monterey, it was Hazel Tharsig. And she was, but her mother told her that if she went on stage using her real name, she would kill her. So she needed to change her name, and she took Carlotta Monterey being from Monterey, California, and picked Carlotta just because she thought it sounded exotic, and she wanted to be kind of, exotic.
And that led to her first important role, right?
And it did. She was in agent's office, and Lee Schubert of Schubert Theaters called looking for a dark, exotic actress of continental beauty, and she happened to be in the office, and they said, well, we got one right here, how about her? So that's how she started on.
Not bad for a Danish girl from the Oakland area, huh? Okay. Yes, question up here. Well, Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley.
Oh, that was in the same part.
Yeah. We. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was actually, yes, I'm named kind of after Dale. And really after my grandfather, whose name was Dave, but I couldn't be a Dave. So yes, Dale Evans was popular at the time, so I was Dale. You're right.
Other question? Yeah, one way in the back.
I want to hear the gory details about the Eugene.
Oh, good. She was quite popular with the men in her early days, and she had a wealthy New York businessman, a very elderly gentleman from about 1920 to 26 by the name of Speyer, and he gave her an annuity for life of $14,000 a year, which today would be worth about $220,000 a year. So she didn't have to worry about money.
Yes.
And was actually looking, she was married 4 times. Gene was her 4th husband. She was really looking for someone to take care of. And I think she took care of that elderly gentleman for those 6 years that they were together, that he felt the need to compensate her for the rest of her life for that.
Other questions? Yes, question is.
How long have you been married?
Oh,
Us married, yeah. We just
25 years,
celebrated our
25th wedding
anniversary.
25, yes. And we worked together before that. We've worked together in the theater, over 30 years.
But Dale had to, after we met in the theater and we got married, she decided to go into a more respectable
I decided
profession.
I liked to eat because I didn't have that annuity. So I decided to be a teacher.
Yes. So she put in her time teaching kindergarten students and other elementary school age children.
And it was great. It was wonderful.
But now that she's retired, I can talk her into going on these adventures. Yes. Question over here. Oh, well, they got married in 1926, 29. 29 in Paris. And they were married until Gene's death, which was in 1953. And she lived till?
Yeah, Carlotta lived till 1970. She was 81. So she definitely outlived him. And that thing about it not publishing his plays until 25 years after his death, she didn't quite honor that. She published him about 3 years after his death. She was publishing Long Day's Journey, but again, not for the money. She thought it just needed to, it was such a great work that it needed to be out there.
And there were several
And it was
things
a good
that
choice.
happened at that point, too. They lived at Dow House until 1946. So they were
45? Maybe, I don't
No,
know.
I think it was 46. They were there for 8 years. And probably would have gone on staying there happily, except for the change in their fortunes with the war and everything. So I saw another hand. I see a hand over here from Sarah.
Just something that came up in the matinee that I want to make sure they hear about is your trouble, Carlotta, your trouble seeing, and
Oh.
then the whole eye story.
Oh,
Yes,
you want to
yeah.
hear that again?
I want to hear it again. It was
So this comes up because Carlotta was the primary typist of a lot of Gene's work. And his handwriting, if you go back and you look at any of the archives and stuff, Yale has a wonderful library of O'Neill stuff. And his handwriting is minuscule. It's really quite small, which would be a challenge for most of us with good eyesight.
But that was not what hurt her eyes. Her eyes were bad from the time she was young, and when she was a teenager, she tried to have surgery where the surgeon took her eyeballs out and scraped the back of the sockets and put them back in. And, this was, 1911, before that even, 1908. So this surgery didn't go very well. It didn't help. It probably made it worse. But she really couldn't see very well at all. But of course, being a vain actress, she didn't want to wear glasses very often. But that's why I needed them to see, so we could use my little reading glasses.
I do want to say, though, at the afternoon, your reaction was what I would expect. But at the matinee, I don't think Dale saw, and Sarah probably didn't see either. But as she was describing this procedure, there was one gentleman sitting down in the front going, "Oh yeah, I remember that."
Really?
Like, "Oh yeah, everybody did that. That's common." I'm thinking, really? Okay.
But that did cause difficulties in their life. That his writing was so bad, her eyes were so bad, and it caused a lot of tension.
So now you're joining the critics who think my writing is bad, huh?
Oh, no, your handwriting,
There was a hand in the middle there. Two
One
questions.
is, when Carlotta was transcribing, was she ever commenting and saying, "Oh, no, change that or do that"? Was she changing his work or commenting that she didn't like it, or?
I believe
suggest-
she
or
really,
influenced him or rewrite it, or?
I think she influenced him a lot before things were down on paper, but I think once it was down, she respected his work so much that she was not going to change a word of it.
And you had a second question.
When did you get to the townhouse?
Oh.
Before you started this, or after, during?
That's good.
Oh, for me personally,
Both of you, when
Well,
you went there?
Dale is going to see it for the first time tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're going. We have our reservations. And if you want to go, if you haven't been, you have to get reservations months in advance. So just warning. We got ours. But Brian went.
Yeah, I
years
had
ago.
gone. I'd been working with a theater company down in Sunnyvale, which is part of in San Jose, and had wanted to see the house because I knew that he had lived there, and called in advance and went out there on my own on the little shuttle bus and everything with a little group of tourists and everything, and walked around. And it really is an interesting place. It's not a palatial mansion or anything. It's pretty confined.
Primitive, yeah.
And there is a wonderful book out just in the last few years, which was not available the first time that I did O'Neill, and that's by Travis Bogard, who's an O'Neill scholar, and he wrote a book that was for the foundation at Dow House, and it's called From the Silence of Dow House, and it's about Eugene and Carlotta. Most of the books don't really talk about Carlotta much, but this book is devoted to the two of them. It's a thin paperback that was put out by the Dow House Foundation. It was a real interesting read. So anyway, we're going to
Just a
make
little side note on
correct
that. We bought each other that book for Christmas.
without knowing. Oh,
Oh. That she had to use. Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
To go back to your other question, I will say that didn't mean that she approved of everything he wrote. She did not like Moon for the Misbegotten, the play that he wrote about his brother Jamie and the death of his mother. Carlotta didn't approve of the play and thought it wasn't a good play, but she did allow it to be produced, however. So she tried to stay
And he
out of
kept
criticism.
dedicating them all to her.
So, I mean, what do you do, right? Okay. Other questions? One last question, and I see the human clock is standing. Yes, last.
So when you left Danville, then tell me what happened, where you went,
Oh.
and what your life was like. You died at 51
In 1953, he died. He had just after his 65th birthday. But his career had changed for two reasons. Partly because they left Dow House, and they ended up traveling from different short range housing, whether hotel rooms or rental houses that they didn't stay in very long. Both of them were beset by illnesses at that point. Once they left Dow House, everything seemed to go downhill physically for them. O'Neill developed what had been thought to be Parkinson's at the time, but was really a neurological hereditary illness that caused his hands to tremble, which meant, tragically, that he was at a point in his life where he really was creatively active, but physically unable. He tried to transcribe things through a dictaphone, and he just couldn't do it. He could not write unless it was by hand. Couldn't type himself, and so he reached a point where he was no longer able to write. And Carlotta was suffering from different manic depressive problems and was given a thing called bromide, which they didn't know at the time built up in a very short while in your system because it was the kidneys that don't flush it out of your system, and so it would create hallucinations. And pretty soon they were both they're both hallucinating and thinking and paranoid and fighting with one another, and it became a very very unhappy situation. But they would always come back. They always came back to each other, even through all those things. So
happy when they lived in Danville, and then
Yes.
yeah, afterwards
Yeah.
it just got increasingly bad. So, and one last anecdote.
I'll be out there.
O'Neill was
Ask
born.
me out there.
O'Neill was born in Broadway, in the Broadway district, in a hotel, and hated hotels his whole life. And of course, his dying words are, born in a hotel room and God damn it, died in a hotel room. Sure enough, he was in a hotel when he died. Is there a question? Okay, thank you.
So, did you tell them how they pronounce Dow House?
Oh, yes. In the Travis Bogart book, he makes the point, and we were aware of it, that at the time, the O'Neills and everyone else would have popularly called it Tail House. But we felt that, and we talked about it, we felt that it would be more jarring to a contemporary audience to say Teo and have you think, don't they know how to say it?
Especially because you guys all probably know out here.
Yeah, with it. So we made the choice to pronounce it the way that it's pronounced today, even though they would have said Teo.
So anyways, I thought that was interesting because I did too. So they will be outside. I know there were a few more hands up. I'm sorry, we just have to cut it short. But they will be out in the lobby if you want to ask them more questions, talk to them, take pictures, whatever you'd like. Thank you all so much for coming. Next month is March 27th, Florence Nightingale at 7 p.m. at the Theater. So we will see you then. Have a good rest of your night. Thank you all for coming.